So we're coming live to you from the Havana, Cuba Bureau, CNN's Havana, Cuba Bureau, and today we have a very special guest. We have Rene Marsh from Washington, D.C., our aviation correspondent, who's covering a pretty unique story. The first flight from the U.S. to Cuba, 55 years. What was it like? Welcome to Cuba, first things, but
Thank you.
What was that like, being on that flight?
You know, sometimes you're going through the motions of trying to get make deadline, because that was the big push. We wanted to make sure we got it, everything together and get through the process. But thinking back, it was an amazing experience to be there, to be on board, and to be a part of that, to talk to so many people who, you know, they had the same story, which is they hadn't been here in decades. They had family members that they hadn't seen in decades, and the emotion on board that flight. I mean, you know, when I get on board a flight, whether I'm going to New York or even on vacation, you don't see that kind of emotion.
And they were playing music. It was a bit of a party, right?
Yes, it was a party, but then there was also some crying. And so it was really a special type of flight. And then at the moment where we touched down, to see all of you, including you, lined up along the tarmac, you just really got the sense that this was a big deal. And it was history. And we'd all been waiting. You know, you and I have been talking via email and setting this whole thing up, but it has been a long time coming, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the flight takes just a little bit over an hour.
Yeah.
And yet, to make this all happen, we were talking for weeks. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? How are we going to be live? Obviously, a lot of limitations here,
Yeah.
what you can do technology-wise. The internet at the airport was incredibly slow.
Yeah.
They usually don't have internet at a lot of these places. But it all worked out. You're here. What do you think of Havana?
I think it's great. I mean, you know, we landed in Santa Clara, and that was a totally different feel out there. And then you come to Havana, and you get that big city feel, because there's more hustling and bustling within the streets. But the architecture is beautiful. The old cars that everyone talks about, you know, you got to see it for yourself, and that's amazing. The food is amazing. If you come to Havana, I feel like you need to start a blog so that people know where they need to go for food, because you were right on. For every place that you sent us, it was just, the cuisine is so good.
It's improving. It's coming
Yeah.
a long way, and you know, the dichotomy you get between Havana and the countryside, you know, explains why all these airlines were fighting so hard to get the Havana route. They just announced that the other day, the day on Wednesday when you guys touched down, because I think there are 20 daily flights to Havana, but there's 60 airlines who wanted those routes. So they just got this worked out. Probably by the end of the year, you will be able to fly the U.S. to Havana. Of course, our flights, as Rene was on the first flight, that are already going to other parts of Cuba, but the Havana routes, there was a lot of fighting, period.
Yeah.
Going to Cuba, the Havana routes, it really got a little ugly. I think this is
like you were saying, they were cutthroat. I mean, we didn't know, we couldn't even make our flight plans or even book our hotels, because we were on one flight and we didn't know if another airline would try to beat the other, and we'd have to do the old switcheroo and come earlier. So it really was very competitive, but I think it speaks to just, you know, how much people wanted this market, meaning the commercial side, the airlines. They wanted to, you know, you always want what you can't get, right?
absolutely
And so
forbidden fruit.
Exactly.
Well, Daniela, our producer, has just given us the first question, and I'll jump at this one, and please let me know what your thoughts are. Why go to Cuba if the country is communist? And there's a lot of concerns, not about just going to Cuba, but, you know, Myanmar is opening up. North Korea is a country people go to. I've never been there. I've lived in Cuba for 4 years, and certainly there are people who have hesitations about coming to a country that is communist, that does not have multi-party democracy. And if you're staying in a hotel, it's absolutely true. Some of that money, a lot of that money is going to the Cuban government. What is changing now, though, and you've seen some of this, is you can go to restaurants that are owned by regular Cuban citizens. You can stay in houses, you go on Airbnb, and the options are endless, and some of them are very, very nice. And that money goes directly to the Cuban people. Some of it will be paid back in taxes, but the benefits we are seeing by not just Americans, but by international visitors coming to Cuba and looking for a way to help Cuban people, not only by just giving them money and renting their cars, renting their houses, but talking with them. This island has been isolated for so long, and people really feel like they're cut off from the rest of the world. And Cubans that I know, whether they support the government or they do not support the government, they want to have contact with the outside world, and they feel that that helps them to open up this island. You know, the Pope, you know, when he came in 1994, I covered that. 1998, John Paul, he said, let Cuba open up to the world and let the world open up to Cuba. And I think that's what we're finally starting to see now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like you said, the restaurant that we went to yesterday was a private-owned restaurant, so that money that individual would get to keep. So it's almost like this is helping to further foster the spirit of entrepreneurship here in Cuba. With the rise of the smartphones, you were saying back in the day, you were the only one probably with a cell phone.
There were not a lot of people.
Right now, you see people with cell phones, that hotspot, which is still expensive. But then that opens up, the possibility for someone to open a business. These things break, so you've got to fix them. So there's that. But tell me if you feel the same way. On our way here, we spoke to an older generation Cuban who wasn't as excited about the opening of these commercial flights. But then when you talk to younger, maybe millennials, they are excited. I think there's a generational divide, right?
Absolutely.
With how people feel about
for particularly for people, the majority of this island born after the revolution, this is all they've ever known. This sort of Cold War animosity. It's either you're with the revolution or you're with the enemy. And to see some easing happening, it's not the fall of the Berlin Wall. That hasn't happened here. A lot of people don't think that will ever happen here. It's going to be a very gradual, you probably won't see big changes until the generation that runs Cuba, the Castros, leave power, which is supposed to happen in 2 years. Raul Castro would step down. But for younger people, they are just so thirsty to know the world, get online. I know Cubans who are designing apps now, and you just think, how can these people do this when they have such limitations? But they have this hunger that they want to experience the world, they want to travel. And most people can't afford these flights, unfortunately. But the fact that there are flights gives them hope. And so we're going to go to our next question. One second.
And while you do that, Patrick, another thing that I notice in talking to people here is, to your point, they're very resourceful. I met one man yesterday who says, in America, if your umbrella breaks, you throw it away. Here in Cuba, we figure out a way to
Nobody
fix
throws
it.
anything out.
Yeah, and that spirit is very admirable to see that it is a country where there may not have everything that they need, but they somehow figure out a way to make it work.
And so we're going to go on to your next Spanish lesson. Resolver.
Resolver.
Resolver. That means to resolve, and it's a verb. It's an adjective, and that's what Cubans say. Something's broken, I don't know how I'm going to fix it, but we're going to resolver. There's a way to get everything done. Your car breaks, you can't just go buy the parts. You certainly can import the parts. There's no Amazon.com here, but people figure out a way to move forward. And that's the amazing thing about Cuban people. So this question is, can Americans build resorts in Cuba? And the answer, of course, is complicated. We have one American-run hotel to open up this year. Sheraton, the Starwood chain, has opened up the first American-run hotel here in as well over a half century. So now you have American Airlines coming here. You can stay at American Hotel. You can book online. But because it's Cuba, you have to go and do a partnership with the Cuban government. I know this hotel has had some issues getting the hotel to the quality that visitors would expect. And this goes back to staying in people's houses. Because if you stay in a Cuban's house, they treat you like family. And I always tell that to people. There's some that are nicer than hotels, and certainly the food and the treatment that you'll get is just probably beyond anything, almost anywhere else in the world. So that's a way to get around staying in a government-run hotel. It still feels a little bit like you're in sort of 1970s East Germany or something like that. They're still working on customer service here. But
you think we'll see a lot more American hotels, or do you think they'll hold on to that industry, the government?
They are lining up. Well, the government doesn't want to run them anymore, less and less. They want foreign companies to come in that have the know-how, have the money to invest. So just on the street there, there's a hotel called the Santa Isabel, and that's also going to get taken over by Starwood. And it's a beautiful hotel, but I stayed there one time, and I remember there were no insides in the toilet. Someone that had walked off. So this is the stuff that happens here sometimes.
It's the one like, what happened?
Their toilet probably broke at their house, and they just took it out of my.
Okay.
Hey,
that's the
wrestle
problem.
there. Wrestle
right,
there.
Exactly.
But if you stay at a U.S. hotel, that's the same hotel. We had a cameraman who stayed there one time, and the AC went out for the whole hotel. And this is in the summer, July, and the lady at the front desk went home to her house and got our cameraman her fan and gave it to him. So that's the heart and of Cubans.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't happen in many other places. And so he felt so bad that he had her fan, but that was the best he could come up with.
What's the word again?
Resolver.
Resolver.
This is for you. How many flights will be available from the U.S. to Cuba?
Well, the agreement allows for up to 110. So it all depends on the demand. You mentioned Havana. Those announcements that happened yesterday, that's the most sought after destination is for flights here. And we know up to 20 daily flights will be going between the United States and Havana. But again, that agreement is for up to 110 daily flights. Will we see 110? Again, I think it just essentially depends on the demand for these markets. Now that Havana opens up, will Havana kind of outdo all these other markets? Can some of these other smaller markets sustain itself? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Do you?
Time will tell. I think there's a point, we'll have to see what the demand is, because, this is an interesting thing about the changes that have happened under the Obama administration. There still is a travel ban for Americans to come here. It's still illegal to come here
that,
for the purposes of tourism.
Yeah.
But it's easy to forget, because when you got on the JetBlue flight the other day, what did you have to do to be able to come here? You just would check a box, right?
Right, and they did ask me what was my reason for travel. The lady behind the desk, and I told her, journalist, and that was it. So you're right. I mean, although on paper there are these categories you have to fit into, it is still a lot easier now to travel here than it was before. And not to mention how to purchase the ticket and how affordable it is now, right?
Absolutely. Well, I want to bring this up because you've seen the old way it works and the new way. So the new way we talked about, you get online, you book your ticket, it's done in minutes. Yesterday, you had to go to the airplane ticket office in Havana. That's how we used to, up until now, had to always buy flights.
There was a line, and we didn't know, when it would be our turn. We still, by the way, don't have our seats secured. We haven't paid.
Wrestle there.
We haven't paid, so we may be here with you a little bit
You're
longer.
Welcome. You're welcome to stay.
But we're hoping we work that out.
You may be staying. And you have the reservation.
Yeah.
Which took a couple of days for us to do. You go to an office, you wait in line, and this is the charter services, which is before how you would go to the U.S. And so, because Havana flights haven't started, we were just trying to get you on a flight out. We sent the driver 2 or 3 times. He goes once. Well, the office had to close early because they lost power. Oh, the internet's down. And this morning, we hope he'll just be able to give them the money, and they'll give him the tickets. And
although I don't mind staying
You
home.
You tried to get home. So next question is, what is the weather like in Cuba?
Well, I don't know if you can see it, but we're both sweating right now. And then on top of that, we have like 3 lights on us. So it's a little balmy, but it's the Caribbean. What do you expect?
It's the Caribbean in September. Previous question, somewhat similar. What is the best time to come here? I love the fall.
Yeah.
So you're going to come back. When you worked in Miami, it's a very similar. We're so close to Miami, and it's a very similar climate. So summer, dress accordingly. The winter is lovely here. How much will it cost? I think people find that this is actually a pretty expensive destination. You read about how the average Cuban, this is true, only makes about $20 a month, which is not a livable salary. It's a big problem the government has here, one of many. But for international visitors, it is expensive because everything's priced for foreigners. So, and the government has a lock on the market. But what we are seeing, as with more competition opening up, more restaurants, more casas opening up, that prices are going down. But a big change, though, is the airplane tickets. I mean, they've cut it in half.
I know, $99 one way.
49
on JetBlue.
on
but then
silver is cut in half.
Right. I mean, so that really isn't, and I mean, it was an hour flight, so it's so easy now.
Now, you're the expert on this. Can JetBlue make money selling tickets for $99?
I think they're banking on, they want to do as many routes as they possibly can, and I think things first is just getting to the destination, making sure they work out the logistics.
Planning the flag.
Yeah, planning the flag. And I think they are banking on the interest level and the demand being there to really be profitable for them. But again, the question becomes, how long do they stay in some of the smaller locations? I mean, not all of those locations may be profitable, so we may see a change where in the beginning, JetBlue's offering to X number of cities, and then in the end, it may only be Havana. All comes down to the consumer interest. And I don't think anyone has any doubt, though, that Havana is going to be a highly sought after.
And they're going to redo the entire airport here. Actually, they're going to have 2 international airports here. I don't know when, but that is the plan. The government realizes that the airports they have here are so outdated, and the demand is going to be such. And if they were able to receive 60 flights a day, they would have U.S. companies flying 60 flights here today. So just asked about cigars. You tried your first Cuban cigar the other day.
Oh my gosh.
I've smoked more than one or two.
That video.
You did great. You did great.
No, I didn't.
You did great.
You're being nice. He's being nice. I was not good. I look like a rookie. You look so cool. You got the whole look down.
I've had time to practice.
Yeah, I know. You got to teach me that later, actually.
No problem. So the thing about cigars, they are as good as you've heard if you like cigars. They are not entirely legal. You can only bring back $100 worth of cigars or rum.
Can you say that again? Because I have a long list
For her
people.
colleagues in the Washington Bureau watching this, it's only $100.
That's
that
it.
doesn't even get you a box of the good ones. Renee's
thank
going to
you.
do what she can for everybody. Not everyone's going to get a Cohiba, but she's going to do her best. But that is the law, and of course, you should comply with the law. So the top line cigars go for hundreds of dollars. These are the top end cigars in the world, the only handmade cigars from beginning to end. They have a problem now with making enough because even with the small increase we've seen in Americans, about 100,000 last year, that's double from the year before. Every American that I come here, even if they don't smoke,
They want a cigar.
they want a cigar.
That's me.
There you go.
I never even smoked a cigarette in my entire life, but I'm like, how can you come to Cuba and not smoke a cigar? And so I definitely need to work on my my look, but it was
get it done.
It was a good one.
You get it done. There you go.
Which one did you give me again?
That was a Trinidad.
Okay.
That was a Trinidad. It was
That's
a
right.
smaller one. They have all shapes and sizes. Some that take hours to smoke. Maybe we'll start with that. No. But
Baby step.
this is a country where it's not healthy, of course, but people still smoke here a lot because it's part of the culture, and they are phenomenal. If you do that, we don't recommend it, of course.
And Patrick, it's $100 limit for alcohol and tobacco altogether,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So that might get you a bottle of rum, very good Cuban rum, or a bottle. A box or half a box of cigars, but they sell them individually. They sell them in 10 packs. I think they need to come up with a $100 box just for the American market, make it easy because no one really knows. But so a couple interesting questions here. I love these. Can Cuban citizens buy flights? And this is a change that I have seen in the time that I have been here. It used to be, and this was probably the most unpopular law in a country full of unpopular laws for Cubans, which is that you need government permission. It's called the Tarjeta Blanca to leave. And you could have your ticket, you could have your passport, you could have your visa, and the government would take years to give you that permission. It was really an awful thing. I think everyone. So about 2 years ago, the government of Raul Castro said, we're going to do away with this. And it's had, like everything, good and negative impacts. The good is that people have been able to travel more freely. They can go and visit their U.S. Relatives in the U.S. For a lot of people, the U.S. has given them multi-entry visas. So you see Cubans, before if you left this island, it was like for the rest of your life. You left for good because you would never get to travel again. And now people go back and forth. On the negative side, in many ways, we've seen people go to countries they don't need visas in Latin America because Cubans need visas to go to the U.S. and most other countries. There are a couple countries that don't require them to have visas, like Ecuador up until recently. You didn't need a visa. So what do? Is they go to Ecuador and they go all the way up through Latin America to get to the United States. Of course, as you know from living in Miami, if you are Cuban and you reach U.S. territory, you get to stay.
Yeah.
Wet foot, dry foot. And so that's created the situation where you have tens of thousands of Cubans in Latin America walking overland, and it's made those governments very upset. The U.S. said that they're sticking with that policy. It is one of the many issues that still exist between these two governments that need to be worked out. So they've made progress on some things. A lot of things still have to be worked out. And let's see, how does Airbnb work in Cuba? I think when you come down the next time, we're going to stay Airbnb.
Airbnb.
Try
Airbnb.
it.
Now, you were saying, though, you, as someone who lives in Cuba, cannot stay in an Airbnb. Explain that to people. I could when I arrived
Absolutely.
here, correct?
You from Washington, D.C., could book that Airbnb. 2 seconds. It works really well. It's amazing because, again, most Cubans don't have internet in their homes, but they've resolver. They figured out a way. They have a friend who has internet. They have someone in the States who's their booking agent. Who knows how they do it, but they do it, and it's a great way to find really nice casas. If I try to book it from here, the Airbnb that's like right over there, the embargo doesn't let Airbnb do it from Cuba. So I can, not only can I not do it from Cuba to find an Airbnb in Cuba, I can't rent an Airbnb like in Los Angeles from Cuba. That's the embargo. It blocks things like iTunes, Skype. Certainly, if you get on your banking website, it'll get frozen. I warned you guys about that when you came. Don't do it. It's happened to CNN employees. They get here, they get online. So while we're seeing a loosening of restrictions, a lot of things, the majority of the embargo is still in place, and it affects a lot of these small things that you take for granted.
And as I understand it, I mean, to answer that person's question, I mean, if you're coming from the United States, you're staying here in Cuba, Airbnb works just as it would work for any other destination. So that's an option as well.
It's a great option. So, but think how things have changed. Before, it was really difficult to get flights, come through third countries, go on these charters, which were really expensive, very tough to book. Then you get here and you're calling hotels, they don't pick up the phone, you don't have a place to stay. Now you get online, you book your JetBlue, you book your Airbnb, and you're all set. So
now Patrick, if someone here in Cuba has a home that's listed on Airbnb, do they keep all that money for themselves, or do they have to share any of it?
They pay taxes to the Cuban government, but it's actually fairly reasonable because some of these houses, the best ones, I was trying to book a friend the other day, and he's coming in January, and I called one of the houses that's rented out, that's rented out on Airbnb. I just had their number, so I called them, and they're booked till March.
Wow.
So they'll pay, depending on how many rooms they have, they pay something to the government. Could be $20, $30, $50, but the profits they're making, renting out a room for $50, $100, even more, a house for $200, that is a fortune here. So I have a friend who's a doctor. She's not really working much as a doctor anymore because she's doing the Airbnb thing and making more in a night renting out that house than she does like in 6 months.
So if you're someone who's traveling and you say, hey, I want to help the people of Cuba, that is an option.
Absolutely.
Because they're actually going to get to keep
They're keeping most of that money, and it is benefiting the Cuban people. And that's where we're going to wrap it up. But it's been great talking to you, and it's been great having you here these days.
You're the best.
No, and you're going to come back. You're going to come back.
Yes, I want to come back. He's the man in Havana, guys.
Your man.